For years, South Kingstown High School has had a reputation for successful baseball teams. Over the past 4 years, the varsity squad went to 3 consecutive championship series, winning a state title in 2018. But success under head coach Jim Sorrow has come with a cost.
It wasn't time to be quiet anymore, and I reached out to some other parents who I knew had the same feelings, and we decided to collectively as a group file complaints with the school administration about the coach.
Joe Meek, a retired lieutenant colonel with the Rhode Island State Police, said he and other parents complained repeatedly about Sorrow's abusive behavior toward players, including Meek's son, Owen. And they raised questions about expenditures from a student activities account, funded largely by the sale of coupon books to local businesses by the players.
If I were coaching and I was accused of half of these things, I would more than likely be gone in a heartbeat.
Matt Crook's son Lucas left the team during his junior year, in part because of the toxic atmosphere surrounding the program.
There are kids who hate him, flat out, whether they'll admit it or not. And there are kids who dislike baseball and South Kingston baseball specifically because of him. I've talked to their parents. Many of them won't come forward.
In a series of interviews with the Hummel Report over the past month, parents outlined a pattern of behavior by Sorrow that they say has been going on for years. And they told of their frustration in getting no traction with the administration when they brought it to the school department's attention. The complaints include Sorrow calling Meek's son Owen a retard multiple times in front of the team, an assistant coach throwing chewing tobacco at him, players being pulled out of class during the school day to perform maintenance on the baseball field a few blocks away from school grounds, and pressuring players to blitz neighborhoods to sell the discount coupon books. Despite the detailed complaints and allegations to the administration, then the school committee, Sorrow was back on the sidelines again this spring. Ken Loud's son Harrison played all 4 years and graduated earlier this month.
Well, I think it's a systematic failure of both the school committee and the administration to see what was presented to them. Let's just reverse things. If this was a student bullying another student, what action would be taken?
If he did some of the stuff in the classroom that he did on the field, no way. Union rules or not, union, bargaining power aside, they would look to get rid of him as a teacher. So why is it accepted on the field? Because it's that old school mentality, right?
Kevin and Colleen McGee's son Connor also left the team, but has gone on to play baseball in college. McGee, who has coached state championship teams in Rhode Island and North Carolina, said he saw coaches who were hard but fair, not Sorrow.
You convince yourself that it's just hard coaching, and winning breeds success. Buries a lot of things. If he was a failing coach, would they get rid of him? I don't know.
It's just mind games that they're trying to control the kids and exert their power and authority over the kids to make them do whatever they say, practice whenever they want, and not complain about it. Again, that's bullying, and we can't stand for that as a community.
Sorrow was an infielder for Narragansett High School in the 1980s, before going on to have a successful career at the University of Rhode Island. He was hired as a health and physical education teacher in South Kingstown in 1994 and began coaching in the spring of 1995. We wanted to get his response to the allegations about his behavior. So we caught up with him as he left school for the day last week.
Jim Hummel. How you doing? Did you get my messages, Mr. Sorrow? Did you get my messages? Why won't you return my messages, sir? Did you get my emails? Why won't you talk to us?
Likewise, Principal Robert Mezzanotte and former Superintendent Kristen Stringfellow did not respond to multiple emails over the past several weeks. Interim Superintendent Robert Hicks, who took over when Stringfellow left abruptly in April, did respond. Hicks in an email told us the school department conducted an investigation, but is prohibited from talking about it publicly because it involves personnel matters. And the teachers union, we found, has also gotten involved in the case.
I don't understand how a coach, when it's an extracurricular activity, it's not, I mean, yes, it's the school, right? It's South Kingstown. It's not part of his job as a teacher. Why is there union representation and protection?
We didn't hear anything. On September 5th of 2018, I emailed the principal, Robert Mezzanotte, and I got a response back that the investigation had concluded and that they had also received 19 letters of support for the coach, which I thought was strange. Like, we're trying to tell you that something has happened to our sons collectively, and you're discounting that by saying that you've gotten 19 letters of support for the coach.
Almost like in defense of.
Correct.
The school committee in March voted to enter into a memorandum of agreement with Sorrow at a meeting just as this year's season got underway, but released no details. Loud said his son reported that Sorrow's demeanor was not as coarse at the beginning of the year, but got worse as the season went on. He also said practices were shorter, players were no longer being called out of class to work on the field, and the coupon books weren't being sold this year. School committee chairwoman Stephanie Cantor, in an email to the Hummel Report, said, quote, "Quite honestly, I have no intention of participating in an interview, on or off camera, about confidential personnel matters that are thoroughly vetted. Particularly in this situation, the matter was vetted by two significantly different school committees, with information that parents are not privy to. I appreciate your commitment to investigative reporting, but it's a hard pass for me." Then there's the issue of the Student Activity Fund. Meek put in a series of public records requests and found the account paid for a $50 fine for Sorrow getting ejected from a game, a $200 fine for the pitching coach who violated interscholastic league rules by coaching an AAU team out of season, $600 for a coach's dinner for 40 people, and $400 for sponsorship and raffle tickets for the URI baseball program.
It was like an Oliver Twist. Send the minions out to shake down the neighborhood and bring home the cash.
They have forwarded their findings to the Rhode Island State Police, who 2 years ago charged a coach who was doing similar fundraising in Lincoln with embezzlement from the account. In the case of South Kingstown, the expenditures from the fund had approval from the administration.
Do you think that Coach Sorrow is fit to coach, given what you've heard from your son?
My son, no. I mean, I know people have to put up with certain things, that the world isn't a fair place, but what he did to my son is not acceptable at all, especially for a high school student who is forming his brain, forming his personality, forming his person. And to be talked to like that and subjected to the things that he was subjected to is not acceptable.
The concerted effort by parents to alert the administration might not have materialized if Owen Meek had not had a run-in with Sorrow after he left the team. Sorrow had called Meek out for missing a practice because of his cousin's wedding and then going to another school function.
He finally was fed up. The coach was giving him a hard time again about attending another school function to miss a practice, and so he resigned from the team, telling the coach that he didn't think he was a good coach, he didn't think he was a good person, and he didn't want to play for him anymore, and he walked out with his head held high, which I was very proud of him. Several weeks later, the coach started harassing and intimidating Owen in school, and so much so, like, "Meek, why won't you talk to me? Hey, Meek, what's going on?" More of a harassing, intimidating kind of manner, until my son again got fed up and told the coach to shut up. I think he'd had enough. So the coach and the teacher wrote my son out.
Then the story began to spill out as Owens' parents got involved.
And eventually, Owen took it upon himself to write an email to the principal filing a formal complaint against the coach for a variety of issues. And that's where this all started. So it wasn't about him not playing. It wasn't about any vendetta that he had against the coach. It was the coach picking on him after he resigned that just led to him to say, you know what, I've had enough and I've got to stick up for myself. Owen came in and spoke with the principal and the superintendent. The other parents went in by themselves. And then I checked after Principal Mezzanotte told me that he had concluded his investigation. I checked with all the other kids that Owen had mentioned who witnessed certain things. None of them had been contacted by the administration or by Principal Mezzanotte. If you're going to conduct an investigation, you're going to talk to witnesses. None that I could find was spoken with.
The other parents had similar conversations with Mezzanotte.
He said that he was, you know, there was no big deal about it. You know, he had given his explanation about, you know, how when he was a player in high school and how he didn't get along with his coach and, you know, kind of just brushed it off like, you know, what's the big deal? And I asked him, I said, you got kids? I said, you have young children? I said, you know, if this happens to you, you'll have the same concerns.
The parents who have had the interaction with this, I'm sure, would not be surprised by anything you're saying. Some look the other way, some put up with it, some kids have left the program. If the larger community of South Kingstown heard these details, what do you think the reaction would be?
I think they'd be appalled at what's been going on. South Kingston, that's not what we're all about. When you read, again, the policies and procedures of the school about anti-bullying and being a community that's kind of supportive of everyone, that's not what it's all about.
I just feel like we were heard just to be heard. We came in just to check off the box that I met with the McGees and it's filed away. I felt validated at the time, but I felt like after we left, nothing was going to happen. That it was just two parents complaining their kid didn't have playing time.
Colleen McGee said she went to her son's teacher when he was struggling during the baseball season to keep up with his advanced placement class.
And I said, I don't know what to do. I'm so worried about him. He's exhausted physically. He's exhausted mentally. He doesn't seem himself. He's a very outgoing kid. He's a very social kid. And she said, I see it too. And she said, what's sad is I see this every year with some kids with Coach Sorrow. And she said, unfortunately, nothing gets done. And it was so frustrating for me as a mom, and then hearing from a teacher that is recognizing it, but there's nothing that's going to happen about it.
Loud said he also took issue with Sorrow criticizing his players in comments to the local paper right after the team lost the state championship a few years ago. The coach told a reporter the team had no heart or mental toughness, and that's why they lost.
The coach belittled the team in the newspaper, actually saying that this team didn't play with any heart in the local newspaper. Shameful, absolutely shameful. I saw my son come home completely shattered because he wanted it for the last 2 years because these kids deserved it. They worked hard. But when you're lambasted in a local newspaper because you didn't have heart, you got to tell me, well, what man does that? What coach does that? What parent does that?
And how are you as a principal okay with that article?
Or an athletic director.
Anybody. Like that's what I don't understand. That blows my mind.
I can tell you in North Carolina, that same coach is in the athletic director's office that next day, probably gone. If he's a long-term successful coach over decades, maybe he survives. But with his background, he wouldn't even be coaching down there.
Who's protecting him?
I think the silence.
Do you think he counts on that silence?
I think so. I mean, we all want our kids to do something that they love. And it's playing baseball. You almost feel like you have to put up with it. I think there's many, many people who feel the same way, know the same things, but haven't really addressed it because they can get through high school and then it's on the back burner. It fades.
That's part of my hope, is that by bringing this to light, is that behavior will change, whether it be Coach Saro or anybody else, so that kids can experience their high school days, whether it be in school or on the baseball field, have fun, enjoy it, and grow up to be adults that can look back and had a good memory.
The McGees say they found it ironic that Superintendent Stringfellow, in her comments at Connor's graduation a year ago, spoke about a new anti-bullying initiative at the high school called Choose Love.
The superintendent talked about how we're such a wonderful community about not bullying, and I sat there face to face with the principal crying as a mother about how my son had been treated in his school for the last 3 years. And I walked out of there feeling like nothing was going to happen. And here we are a year later and nothing has happened.
In South Kingstown, Jim Hummel for the Hummel Report.
Holding runners in the bottom half inning, no runs, no hits, nobody left on base. Due up from Pilgrim in the top of the second, Kenny Ricks.